A very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our seminar, despite the gloomy weather. My name is Han. I'm a research assistant at SSR, and today we are pleased to have invited the team from South Central Community Family Service Center, who will share their findings on the challenges and enablers of adopting community-centric practices in casework. So Mr. Pek Jie-Hui will first be presenting on the research study, and Ms. Ruth Tan and Mr. Patrick Lau, who are the Executive Director and Lead Social Worker respectively, will join in for the Q&A discussion. We also have Dr. Hana Alhadad, Adjunct Research Fellow and Adjunct Associate Professor at the Department of Architecture, who will moderate this session. Before we begin, I'll first make a few announcements. So we're streaming and recording this seminar on Zoom, and there will also be photo taking at this venue afterwards. So we will upload the recording onto Facebook a few days after the seminar. For your colleagues who are unable to attend, they can watch the recording. So by participating in this seminar, either in person or online, you consent to the photo taking and video recording. So afterwards, for our Q&A, we will have two modes where you can ask questions. For those, all of you here attending in person, you can ask your questions at the microphone stand over there. Or alternatively, if you are shy, you can scan the QR code on the screen and post your questions onto Pigeonhole. So I would like to please take note that we will prioritize questions from on-site attendees. And we will not be taking questions from the Zoom chat for the audience online. So as we have a limited amount of time for Q&A, we apologize if we are unable to address all questions. So before I hand over my time to the speakers, just two more announcements. First is about our two upcoming workshops in April and May. First is on theory of change, and the second is on participatory research for social services. So our moderator, Dr. Hana, will be conducting the second workshop on participatory research on the 8th of May. So if you're interested to find out more, please scan the QR code on the screen. Next, we have an information session about our 13-week mentoring program, which is catered for participants who wish to embark on a small-scale research project under the guidance of a research mentor by SSR. So to find out more about this upcoming research skills mentoring program, we have an information session held on next Thursday, the 9th of March at 3 p.m. And it will be online on Zoom. If you're interested to attend, but you're unable to make it next week, please email us. So without further ado, I will now hand over my time to Jie-Hui, who will start with his presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and also good afternoon to the audience on Zoom. So thank you very much for being here with us this afternoon to listen to our sharing of our practice research study titled Community Involvement in Casework Interventions, the Boons and the Banes. So this was a qualitative research study that was conducted back in 2020. Thank you also to SSR for inviting us to be part of the SSR seminar series. So my name is Jie-Hui. I've been a social worker in SCC for almost 3 years. And joining me today is also Ruth, Executive Director from SCC, and also Patrick, Lead Social Worker, who will join us later for the Q&A panel, moderated by Dr. Hana. So without further ado, so these are the contents that I'll be covering today. So firstly, the context and the background in which this practice research study was conceived, the objectives and the research questions, methodology, research findings, as well as the implications and future directions post-research. So first, I will explain the background and the agency context in which this practice research study was conceived. So as an agency-wide approach, SCC adopts the asset-based community-led development approach, or ABCD for short. ABCD has 5 core principles. I will not go into detail about the core principles, but very briefly, they are: firstly, ABCD is assets-based, so we leverage on the strengths and the assets of community members. Second, ABCD is inclusion-focused, where we create an environment where everyone's gifts and talents are recognized. Thirdly, about relationships-oriented. So relationships are believed to be a powerful driver of change. Fourth, ABCD is place-based, where local neighborhoods are the primary unit of change. And lastly, about citizen leadership, where there is a belief that families and community members have the ability to drive initiatives and change. So at the point in time when the practice research study was conceived, what we realized and observed on the ground was that the ABCD principles were very intentionally applied in community work, but the aspect of applying the ABCD principles through what we call community-centric practices could be strengthened at the case management level. So community-centric practice, or CCP for short, is a term that broadly encompasses community involvement and partnership in any platform. So it could be at casework, group work, comwork, research, or even volunteer and stakeholder engagement. But for this particular practice research, we are more concerned about exploring the adopting of CCP in case management. So as part of the journey to strengthen CCP in SCC, so this prompted us to form the research team to study the challenges and enabling factors that practitioners face in adopting CCP in case management. So one point to note is at the time when the data was collected in 2020, the SCC team of practitioners comprised social workers that do casework, community workers that do community work, and also hybrid workers whom are workers with both a casework and community work portfolio. So when we looked into the literature, what we found was that internationally, casework and community work are increasingly seen as dichotomous practices. The increasing professionalization of social work has led to an increased emphasis on clinical and casework practice, working with individuals and families as opposed to communities, and lastly, an increased emphasis on measuring defined program outcomes. This is likely for the agency to internally evaluate the impact of programs and also in some cases to justify and account for funding. An important term and concept that we came across in the literature is this term called community social casework by Hardcastle and others. So community social casework views the community as a source of resources for addressing issues and needs, and the community is a locus of problem perpetuating interactions. So what this means is that if the problems are not seen as unique within the individual or within the family, but it is seen as nested and embedded within the context of the community. And also the community has resources to address these issues. So the characteristics of community social casework are: professionals are not at the center of helping systems. Resources of informal networks are built upon to address individual and community problems, and this avoids reliance on the caseworker. So the objectives of our study are to study and explore the enabling factors and challenges and barriers that social workers face in adopting CCP or community-centric practices in case management, as well as the suggestions from interviewees on how to strengthen CCP within the agency. For the purposes of the presentation today, I will not go into detail about the suggestions, but more about the enabling factors and the challenges. So this is the methodology of our study. So semi-structured interviews were conducted with the whole team of practitioners at that time, which comprises 21 social workers, hybrid workers, and community workers in SCC. As you can see from this pie chart here, it shows the profile of the interviewees based on the years of experience that they have in the social service sector. So as you can see, there's quite an even spread across the 3 categories of 2 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, and above 10 years. And also interviews were conducted by researchers or interns that were not directly involved in casework. So interviews were then audio recorded, transcribed verbatim, and de-identified before analysis. And the qualitative approach that we have selected is thematic analysis, and it was conducted by 3 coders using Deduce qualitative analysis software. Now, before I go into the research findings, I just have to share a bit about the terminology that will be used by myself, and also you will see emerging in the quotes later by the interviewees. So in SEC, we use the term members interchangeably with casework clients or casework service users. So if you see the term members, it refers to clients receiving casework from SEC. And secondly, the term community members broadly encompasses all residents living in SEC service boundary, whether or not they are receiving casework services from SEC. So I'll first talk about the enabling factors of CCP in case management. So very broadly, the three themes are the workers' perceptions and values, existing relationships between worker and community, and thirdly, the workers' active role in connecting members. So under the first broad theme of the workers' perception and values, the quote here by social worker Q highlights the importance of viewing members through a strengths-focused lens rather than a deficit-focused lens, and also the importance of viewing members as potential contributors rather than mere recipients of services. So if I were to read out, social worker Q says, if you feel that member comes in with a problem, then you will be deficit-based. But if you see member as potential contributor to the community or future prime minister, that means you'll be able to see this person as a person of potential. I guess the way we work with them would then be different. Under the second broad theme of existing relationships, if I were to summarize this quote by social worker M, so M talks about the importance of identifying relationships in the community just by observing their interactions. So social worker M says that children are better connectors than us because of the wide network that some children might have in the community. So just by sitting at the playground to observe the interaction between children or interaction between children and the adults, it allows us to acquire knowledge about some of the existing relationships in the community. And it also provides us with topics of engagement when we talk to the community members. The second point here by social worker W highlights the importance of the rapport between the worker and the member. So W says that because to me, relationship is like Windows software or OS. A laptop with no Windows software, you want to load your game, the software, etc. cannot load. So the OS is the relationship. What's missing is time invested into the building of the relationship. So apart from social worker W, other social workers have also echoed the importance of building on the rapport between worker and member and hinging upon this rapport to introduce CCP into case management. Thirdly, on the third broad theme of the workers' role in connecting members, so what is shown here on this PowerPoint slide will be two examples of how workers introduce and bridge connections between their members. So the first example here by social worker R, who says that he or she likes to introduce people to each other. So what R did was to introduce two of his or her members that was waiting at the FSC. So what happened was then organic conversation started to form between the two members, and one member A herself sought help from member B to help fetch her daughter from the same school. This happened over sometime in 2019 over a period of a few weeks. The second example here by social worker F shows an example of collaboration between two social workers to bridge their casework members with each other. So social worker F says there was one case, social worker's member and my member. Social worker asked for a neighbor who can bring food to a member who just gave birth. My member agreed. She brought her food for the next 2 weeks every day. She only committed for 2 weeks, but after that, she needs to go for employment. So what this also shows is that when neighbors step up to support members, it is done so based on their goodwill, and they are not obliged to provide the support long term. And as the social worker, it's important for us to also respect the pacing and the availability of the member and the amount of resources that they have at that particular point in time. Next, I'll be sharing about the challenges and barriers. Broadly, the three themes are that members are not receptive to making connections with the community. Second is the workers' practical constraints and also mindsets and beliefs. The third is the organizational and institutional barriers. So on the first broad theme of the members' openness to connecting with their community, the quote here by social worker Y highlights that some of the members do lack trust and have negative perceptions of their neighbors. So social worker Y says, I was thinking, were there any neighbors who could help? But member said no, because she said she didn't want the children to mix around with people around the neighborhood. Maybe they don't feel safe. So if there are existing perceptions within the community that the community is unsafe, then community members are also more hesitant to lean on their neighbors for support. On the second point, as pointed out by social worker V, so some families do perceive a stigma associated with help seeking. So social worker B mentions that I think a lot of them wants to keep it private within the family. It is a family issue. I shouldn't be showing my dirty laundry to everyone. To some extent, there is still stigma and shame attached to seeking help. So if I were to share with community or neighbors, wouldn't that mean that I'm a failure and I'm not as capable as other people? So similarly, if families do bear such beliefs that they should keep their problems private within the family, then it is unlikely that they will lean on their neighbors for support with regards to these issues. On the second broad theme, on the workers' practical constraints and also beliefs, so hybrid worker D says that if social workers have limited connections to the community and also limited knowledge about the community, then it is more difficult for social workers to find a potential match between community members. So hybrid worker D says, one thing is, I don't know much about what's going on in the community. It's like dating. Do I know enough girls out there to find out who likes me or who I like? You need to know enough people to find a match for members. So if social workers themselves do not have sufficient knowledge about the availability of informal resources in the community, then it is more difficult for them to find a compatible match for their own casework members. The second point here by social worker J talks about the social workers' perceptions about the members' receptiveness to the community. So J says that the community rejects my member actually. They feel that she is very problematic because a lot of bullies shouting, they do not have a very good view. So even if I wanted to connect my member with the community, I kind of expect the member not to respond well. So if it's part of the workers' assessment and perception that their member is not receptive to the community, then the worker themselves is also much more hesitant and less confident to connect their own casework member with the community. Third, issues surrounding organizational and institutional barriers. So the first point is about confidentiality issues and information sharing. So this is a summarized version of what community worker case mentioned. So K finds it a struggle to manage reporting requirements when community members share information in confidence with the community worker. It feels like he or she could be betraying the community and worries that trust and relationships built with the community will be destroyed. Now, this occurs when community workers and caseworkers have different touch points with the same casework member, and under different circumstances, the same member might share different information to the community worker as the caseworker. And if the member tells the community workers certain information and say that I share this with you, but you do not tell your social worker this, then the community worker will face a dilemma on whether to disclose information to the agency. So in terms of inter-teaming between the community worker and the social worker, that poses as a barrier to coordinating CCP in case management. And on top of that, if risk concerns are disclosed to the community worker alone, then ethical dilemmas can also emerge. On the second point about accountability and the management of risk, so social worker T says that the thing is, if member to member, they make their own connections, it's different. Because it is a vulnerable individual or individuals there. So if anything were to happen and linkage is done through an organization, in this case, it's a social worker from an FSC, then I'm liable for that. So to provide a more concrete example for this, so if the social worker recommends or introduces a neighbor to their own member for childminding services and something goes wrong during that childminding process, then the question is who is liable for that? And if the social worker finds that this risk is too high to bear, then the social worker will also become more hesitant to introduce neighbors into the casework intervention. And it becomes a barrier to adopting CCP in casework. And so these are some of the suggestions that were elicited from the interviews, but I will not be going into detail about the suggestions in this presentation. So if you're interested, please feel free to read our report, which I will share the link later also. Right, so the following are some implications and reflections that the research team has come up with after analyzing the research findings. So firstly, SEC workers generally do see great value in the collaboration of casework and community work. So they occur in tandem and they are not dichotomous. Secondly, There is a need to review the intervention goals of community social casework beyond that of risk management and therapeutic intervention to also include goals such as building social capital of members. Third, the worker's role shifts to that of someone who leads intervention to someone who rebalances power with the members and also to facilitate co-solutioning with the community. And lastly, at the systems level, clearer guidelines are needed for social service agencies with regards to information sharing and also the accountability of risk. So I'll also provide an overview of some events that occurred post-research in SEC to show how research is then connected to practice later on. So what happened was the findings did inform the development of a CCP guide, and this is done to align all staff in the agency to CCP, and this guide is being revised over time. Team meetings and trial supervisions were also conducted to align and deepen the practice of CCP, and also stories of practices which embodied CCP were also documented and included into the CCP guide. All right, so now I will provide two case examples to show how CCP could look like in case management. So the first case example is about the member Mr. A. The second one is about the member Anna. I've also done a video interview of the two members so that we can hear from them their experiences of CCP. And both members have very kindly consented for their video to be shown in this seminar. So first, I will explain their case through the PowerPoint, and then I'll show the video later on. So for case example 1 about Mr. A, so Mr. A's family has 3 people, Mr. A, his wife, and his daughter. So his family has 2 requests. So first is for someone to send his daughter to childcare in the morning because he had work commitments. And secondly, food ration assistance, which is something that we do commonly see in the FSC setting. So with regards to the first request, in a usual typical case management approach, so the social worker will coordinate financial resources to sponsor like school pass or alternative transport. So in this case, the social worker's role is in appealing for funding from formal agencies. What Mr. A, social worker, did instead was to encourage Mr. A to talk to a neighbor. And so Mr. A had conversations with a neighbor, and the neighbor agreed to bring his daughter to childcare in the morning. So in this case, the social worker's role is in enabling through encouragement and also monitoring. On the second request for food ration assistance, so what a usual case management approach, which I also practice, is that social worker would link Mr. A up with systems that can provide food rations, like the FSC, for example. And in this case, again, the social worker's role is in brokering the family with formal agencies. What Mr. A's social worker did instead was to linking up with a neighbor that can deliver food rations to the household. And so in this case, the social worker's role is in brokering the family with informal community resources. Now, before I move on, I would like to add a caveat that CCP in case management is not a better approach than conventional and typical case management approaches. There are pros and cons to both approaches, but rather CCP is an alternative effort and attempt to increase the social capital of members and also to foster mutual community support. Right, so this is case example 2 about Anna and 2 other women whom are LTVP or long-term visit pass holders. So these 3 women are 3 separate families with unique circumstances and are receiving individual casework and counseling in the FSC. So usually what will happen is that these 3 families will remain isolated and they will receive ongoing casework and counseling. So what happened in SEC was that the 3 women with their consent were brought together for an informal group session. So the social worker's role was to facilitate discussion about common issues that they were facing. Then what is ongoing now is an effort to expand this informal group into a community peer support group. And the social worker's role therefore shifts again to facilitating co-solutioning with the community. So I would now share the video on the interview of Mr. A and Anna.
We understand each other in a sense like how we're going to stay in Singapore or how we're going to survive in Singapore. That is our common.
Okay.
Because everybody is a long-term LTVP.
Okay.
But in a group, it's like, for me, it's like, I'm not alone. They're also facing the same problem with me, but in a different way. We can exchange ideas, or we can help. Like, if there's somebody, like for me, if my place that people need to hire, I can offer to them also. Then, like one of the mother is know how to sew or how to do knitting or something. Then the one is I can learn from her because I want to learn this thing also. In government side also, because I always go MOM, I always go ICA, so at least what my idea is also I can share to them also. Experience in some certain things I can advise, but this didn't happen to me also, and this is what you can do, and this is where you can go. At least I can share this experience to them now. For us to grow big and to understand each other and to help more long-term business partners who don't know what some of the laws or laws and regulations of Singapore, something like that, and how can we help them more if in case they need help, let's say example financially or moral support or emotional support, at least they know where to go. Not like the time when things happen to me, bad things happen to me, it's like I don't know where to go. Especially when I don't have friends on this team. So like at least somebody can talk to them, teach them, this one is supposed to do this or you're supposed to do that. I hope one of us, most of us can do like the PR. So at least get more benefits from the government.
Yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the video. So for concluding remarks, so the table here shows a brief comparison between typical case management approaches as compared to CCP in case management. So in terms of the type of resource that's being tapped on, typical methods tend to tap on formal resources from agencies, whereas for CCP, it attempts to leverage on informal resources within the community, for example, the assets and strengths of neighbors. Secondly, in terms of the impact on the service user, so for typical case management, there is continued reliance on formal agencies, whereas for CCP, there is increased social capital and mutual community support, and also reduced reliance on the social worker or the agency. And lastly, in terms of the level of community partnership, for typical methods, the intervention continues to be social worker-led or agency-led, whereas for CCP, it creates an opportunity for interventions to be co-led by agency and community, or to be completely community-led. And therefore, the overall effect is increased community participation. So for future directions to enhance CCP, to enhance the workers' relationship with the community members, actively connect community members, actively consult and involve community members with regards to the agency's programs, services, and even operations. And lastly, to empower and support community members to co-lead or lead initiatives and to drive change. So with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. So this is my email. Feel free to drop me any questions or the general email hello@SEC. And yeah, so this is the URL to our research paper. We have tried to write it as succinctly as possible to ensure that it's reader friendly. So happy reading, everyone. And once again, thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Jie-Hui. May I invite you to remain on stage and invite Ms. Ruth Tan and Mr. Patrick Lau up on stage, as well as Dr. Hana to moderate the Q&A session. Switch to the... Okay, so I'll just flash the... For our audience here with us, you may ask your questions using the microphone stand, or if you prefer, you can also type your questions on Pigeonhole. And yeah, for online audience, there's only the Pigeonhole option. So we have received a few questions about resources. So after this seminar, a few days after, we will send a follow-up email to all registrants, including those who are unable to attend, which will contain the link to SEC's report as well as a PDF copy of the presentation slides. Kindly shared by the speakers. So do watch out for our post seminar follow-up email. All right. So without further ado, I'll hand my time over to Dr. Hana. Thank you.
Thank you, Zihan. Thank you for that amazing presentation and for the amazing work that you guys do. I'm happy to see CCP growing at SEC-FSC because, as we know, there's always that dichotomy, right, with social work and community work, and even social workers and community workers look at each other as like, you do this one, I go and do my own thing, you do your own thing, we all do different things. And I'm happy to see that, you're bridging through CCP, you're bridging the two together for the betterment of the community, for the betterment of the individuals and families that you're working with, right? So it's a win-win situation for everyone. I have a lot of questions, but I know we said we're going to give priority to the in-person group first, and then also in Pigeonhole, there's a lot of questions. But before we do that, I was wondering if you have any reflections from your reflections. Ruth or Patrick, that you'd like to add before we open up to questions?
Yeah, so I think as Jeho is presenting, I just want to qualify that it is not so much a defining moment, but it is a learning moment when we were doing this. So I think when Jeho was presenting and as I was reflecting, right, it's been 3 years since this was actually done. And what has happened in terms of the changes in the agency was that I think it did shape the way we had started to develop a more continuity of a CCP guide within the organization to address things like turnover. That's very real. So I thought the questions on the Pigeonhole is like, everybody's hands raising, right, around continuity. And the reality is work with communities is dynamic. So even what you so-called punctuate at that point of time when you did the study, what you collected at that point in the community will change time. Just as we all have changed through COVID, we have emerged a different person. So do the people in communities have emerged in different forms. So I think we need to acknowledge there is no the only way to do it. So that's one. I think what really stood out, as Jeho was also reflecting, was that I think the part of facilitating connections within the community is something that can be an ongoing process. And I thought that's something everybody is possibly able to take away, saying, okay, I think I could make sense of this, regardless whether or not I think my agency is invested or not invested. So I don't think it's an either or nor. So that was my reflection. And I think the last part is also respecting the agency of the community members in owning that connections, right? So I think it's really about the rebalancing of the power, because very often as professional-led, we have a tendency to take on accountability, risk, which is great, right? We all want to be great accountable professions, but I think we also need to really hold our power in place and then be able to co-create with members what they would want as a sense of agency, and then work with them and leverage on what they permit you to do, what they can offer, and what they cannot offer. And so sometimes professional services, we're talking about the case around confinement food, right? And we say, oh, as a profession, I just probably find a paid confinement food and just settle the problem, right? But here we are, a worker goes out an extra to try to find someone in the block who could connect with it. And the expectations of a professional will be, it has to be 1 month confinement. But to a family who says, I can offer the support, but only 2 weeks because I need to find and feed my family, is can we respect the agency of the other person who says, I can only offer this much at this time, and it might be sufficient. I guess the question would be, are we contented with it, placing our agency's expectation onto the community? So I think we need to be very careful between the expectations placed on the community to perform Or are we leveraging on the community as a source of resource and leveraging on assets to then help them build some sustainability? So I think that was my 3 reflections. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, because especially when you'd like the community to take the lead in managing casework, so to speak, right? Like you said, with rebalancing power, in divesting, in giving up a lot of power, there is also comes with it the anxiety, right? It's like, oh, I'm losing control over this and I can't control the messiness or the mistakes that might happen, or, you know, the confinement food, if it's easier for me to just go pay someone 1 month, whereas now, okay, there's this community member that says, all right, I can give 2 weeks, but then what if after like 3 days, oh, sorry, something came up, I can't. So you have to have that, like, manage that anxiety as well and be flexible to sort of, okay, fine, what's plan B, plan C? So there is that sort of dynamic anxiety management and resource management in practicing CCP. Right? I'd like to open the questions to the floor. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah. Anybody has questions at the back, perhaps? Nope. Okay. I am going to read some of the questions that's on Pigeonhole. I think, Ruth, the most upvoted one, it says connections with resource persons in the community are often made due to connections with individual workers. How do we ensure continuity of resources when workers leave or change portfolios? I think, Ruth, you addressed it a little bit, but I was wondering if, Patrick, you want to reflect or address that question.
Thanks, Hana. So I think maybe before I move on, I also share a little bit of my reflection. So I think, Hana, you rightly point out about the anxiety portion. So I think when I read through all the questions that you might have in mind, so I pick up the common theme. So that's the anxiety. That's the anxiety stepping out from our comfort zone and then to the area of unknown. Yeah, because it's simply because I'm speaking for myself. I'm not sure whether you guys are, because I think you guys are also the practitioner, very experienced practitioner and also clinician in the field. But that's not how we are primarily trained. Yeah, at least for myself, right? So I think in community work. So no, I don't have much idea. So I really need to learn along the way. And then right now we're talking about if you are adopting a systemic perspective. So we used to only manage our own system and also the family and also the member system, which is a client system. But right now we're actually stepping out to a bigger system, more unknown and more uncontrollables. So I think, to be honest, because I come with experience working with the other FSC and also the other clinical settings. So I just feel, So even though I have been in the field for quite some time, I still feel quite challenging. It's because that part of anxiety also taking over me sometimes. Yeah, shall we actually downscale? Shall we actually keep the things more under control, especially when we come to the more challenging situation, crisis, high-risk cases? Yeah, but I think this is all about whether we can actually take a little bit of risk and then to assert ourselves into the area of unknown. So I think this is the sentiment that I can get, because I think a lot of questions actually coming along that line. Yeah, so but I think this questions is particularly talking about the how we can. Yeah, it's a very good question. So I think I don't have definite answer. I also want to hear from you guys. But at the same time, one thing that I can think of would be when we're talking about we work with the community and then we build trust and also relationship with the community. So it's never be just one person. Yeah. So if you're talking about the connection of just one person, like okay, Jie with your member, it's one-on-one and one. Maybe it's just the connection is just one single line. But right now we're talking about we cast a net. Yeah. So which means that there should be multiple touch points. So I think it shall not be just restricted into the casework level. Yeah. So I think Jie link up with one member, myself link up with one member, and try to link up with the others. So that's why I think in SCC we have this. I think it's more like a ritual. So we will organize after post-COVID, we start this. So we will organize community events. Yeah. So I think we know that I think the relationship and also our trust are very crucial. But at the same time, it wouldn't be just appear, right? I mean, the trust among the community wouldn't suddenly appear. So you need to bring people together and then let them to get to know each other. At the same time, also help them to build the trust and relationship among themselves. And then the trust will be multiple touch points. So even for my team, it shouldn't be just Jie or Patrick. It would be multiple person. So a lot of community members, so they actually get to know us very well. So we're like, okay, it's a part of the kampong and also the family. So they will provide, or if they can't find Patrick, they will actually talk to the others. So that's something that we aspire to achieve, but right now it's still a piece of work in progress. Yeah.
So it's not just looking for the social worker that is assigned to your case per se, but it's a team of social workers. Right. Yeah. This leads to the next point. Do you face initial resistance from caseworkers? The next question, right? It says, how do you get started with practicing CCP in casework? Do you face initial resistance from caseworkers? Because I would see like, this sounds to me, I'm a community worker, right? And so a lot of my social worker friends always call me like the maverick, right? Because it's like, whenever they ask me something, my question would be like, okay, let's see lah. Don't know yet. Let me get back to you. I need to know what the community says. There's always like the answer is never definite, right? So, and then the way I answer is, okay, if the community says this one, if they act like this, then we do this. If they say something else, if they say this one, then we do this one, this one. And they're like, oh my God, there's too many variables, right? And they'd like it to be clean and step by step, right? And so with the CCP, it may sound like you're going into the territory of that too many variables, a lot of unknowns. So then they, do you get caseworkers saying, hey, I train as a social worker, not community worker. Like, are you trying to get me to do community work and just like brand it as something else? So do you face that resistance from caseworkers when getting started to practice CCP?
Okay, so maybe I could point out also some of the views that were shared by the interviewees that's related to this question. So how to get started can be as simple as when you are meeting your member or your client and you have conversations to not just talk about the problems and the risk, to also expand that conversation to understanding more about the members' hobbies, their strengths. Because when you ask about hobbies, so the member might say, oh, I like to cook. And from there, you start to identify the strengths. You know that they are potential resource. So it could be as simple as that. And also, as I also mentioned just now, to build on the rapport between the worker and the client. And because this rapport is very important in shifting also the intervention. Other suggestions that also emerged from the interviews include like going for community walks. So social workers need to have knowledge about the neighbors and the residents in the community. So a simple activity like community walks can orientate the workers on the ground. And also I remember another interviewee who shared that instead of going for home visits, why not go for community visits? So you visit your member in this household, but you can also visit the units adjacent to this household to start by getting to know who are the people around your member. Yeah.
Bruce, do you want to add?
So the answer to the second part is yes, a big yes. Okay, let's just face the elephant in the room, right? Do we face resistance? Yes. I think it's a question of not that they don't want to do it. So I just want to qualify that I think all social workers always want to do beyond the call of duty, to the point that they want to make sure that when they want to embark on something, they're going to feel confident and competent, right? So I just want to qualify and set that context that our social workers do want to be awesome workers and they do give so much time and effort. I also acknowledge it's not so much a resistance, but maybe a reality that they do have competing demands, right? So the obstacles and the barriers that Jie Hui mentioned just now in the study is very real, right? So they have real competing demands of time, right? Of complexity versus relationship building, right? So do I crisis, or do I have time to go and hang out with people in the playground and see who this child is talking to, right? So they always have to make a very discerning decision. And I thought that's not an easy feat for them, right? So I would say that's not so much a resistance, but they have to make the call between which of the two. So bandwidth is one. Second is also competing requirements of the casework to make sure that the family is attended to at what's important at that point. So I think maybe to answer that question around resistance, I would reframe it is that they do want to do it, just that maybe they don't have the bandwidth, the mind space, and the actual time to build relationships with people, right? Because people always say communities are built at the speed of trust, right? Not thrust, right? So that needs time to build, okay? So that's the other one. How do you get started, right? I always say we just start a little at a time. I like what Jie Hui said, right? Just start with where you're at. I don't think that CCP should be rocket science. So it's not like you need to throw everything in the bin and then embrace a new bin and be a maverick, right? But just being able to ask and say, with what I have, are there resources that lie within my members that I have? So if I have 30 cases, do I take on the usual asking of how are you doing, what more problems you have, to just asking questions around what resources and assets, and that includes talents, interests, knowledge, abilities, and skills that they already bring. I mean, they're already there in the session. So I think you can get started with that. And I guess the other bit is there are 3 levels, right? So some people say, I'm a fighting social worker trying to be a maverick in my space, in my agency, and nobody supports this idea. So I guess the next question is, do agency support, right? The CCP, which probably my guess it will come out, is yes, I think so. At the agency level, I mean, for those who are in management level here attending, is also this possibility to embrace a little bit of the maverick mindset. We're not saying you must be maverick, right? That's what Dr. Hana brings along, right? We don't need to have 100% full loaded charge of a maverick, but just bringing in that nuance into the organization to help people know there is an alternative muscle that you can exercise. So we're not asking you to take a full body form change. We're just saying that if you take on a community-centric practice, acknowledging that communities are then the source of a possibility to leverage, then you know it's for the purposes. So I like what Dr. Hana, you mentioned just now, that it is for the members. It is for the communities and families that you want to effect change and improve social functioning. And that's what social is about. Then the approach in which we can take will not cost you. You can always go back to a typical casework and nothing will stop you. It will go back to de facto mode. But will it create change? You will know till you try an alternative muscle that you can exercise. So we're just trying to introduce people an alternative muscle that you can exercise through an effort building, through leveraging, that could add on and value add to that outcome of a sustainable change. So I thought that was to answer that question.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. Yeah, that's a lot to think about, right? And like you said, how do you start? I was just thinking, the low-hanging fruits, like you said, if I manage 30 cases, I look at, if I have to repeat myself a lot, I'll look at the case files that I have. What do they have in common? The low-hanging fruit would be, ask them, would you like me to bring some of you together? You seem to face similar issues. Do you want to talk it out through? So the low-hanging fruit is to establish one support group for them, like the women with LTVP, the LTVP path. And so that can move to other things, right? It can evolve to, first it's supporting emotional support from each other, and then it can evolve to any other different type of support as well. So yeah, that's one low-hanging fruit from how CCP can start. The next question that we have, I'm going to combine the next two together because it's sort of interconnected. One is, it says, how do we deal with client confidentiality when connecting clients together? And the other one is, how do you get members to be open and ready to receive support, as members are often hesitant to receive informal help? This, I think, if we put ourselves in the shoes of the community member, right, or the member, sometimes, like, let's say if I want to seek help, I feel maybe someone who's outside my social circle, I feel more comfortable maybe because, it's a professional. So I ask you for help because that's what you're supposed to do. You're paid to do it. Okay, so help me, right? And also sometimes I don't want to talk about my issues. You know, like they say, hanging your dirty laundry, right? I don't want to talk about my issues to my neighbor. Then my neighbor knows, then maybe other people would know, you know, that no face and all that. So how do we, with CCP, how do we navigate the issues of confidentiality of clients? You know, when you're connecting to help each other, that means at what level of information sharing do you have? And also with that, how do you then navigate that stigma of seeking help from another neighbor instead of a professional?
Yeah, I'll just take on this question. So it's a very relevant question. So I think it's a day in, day out challenge. I think first thing that come to my mind is about the level of comfort. Yeah, so I think as a professional, we wouldn't teach the idea of like the respect of self-determination. At the end of the day, is our members' choice. So we can offer different options. So like, okay, so there's something in my mind. I wish that I can actually link you up with the other community partner. Yes, but are you comfortable with that? So you have your ultimate control in terms of what kind of information you want to share. Yeah. So at the same time, so of course, I think you are also an adult, right? So you also have to gauge. So whether you feel comfortable, whether you want to take this step. So it's a shared responsibility and also informed kind of choice. Yeah. So again, it's not rocket science. Yeah. So but at the same time, I think we have to be a little bit more mindful about this part. How do we communicate? At the same time, also there's just now I'm talking about how to maneuver within the casework context. But other things would be more onto the bigger, the macro environment. So I think how we can actually cultivate that culture among our kampong and community. Okay, so let's try to, be a little bit more decent when you actually share about information. Yeah, don't anyhow just capo and then just share about the things anyhow, right? So I think this is something that we also want to actually remind our community. And I think in the community, a lot of things is going on now. So they will still talk, they will still get to know about the things. Yeah, but I think, of course, for those community members who are actually closer with us, so they know they know that, yes, when you are helping, so make sure that you actually wouldn't just spread the news around about what's going on about within the neighborhood. So I think this is something that we can think about. So I think in terms of our casework level, but at the same time, in a bigger environment, how do we cultivate that trust and relationship? Yeah. So but I think a lot of them you feel amazed because I think in our experience working with the community, yeah, a lot of them they actually come with a good intention and good heart. Yeah. So they would just so let's protect our neighborhood. Yeah. So if it's something is not suitable for them to share, yeah, they would just keep it to themselves. Yeah, but that's a matter of risk. So this is a part that we have to clearly explain to the member that whether you want to take the risk together with us. So Ruth and Jamie, anything to add on?
Yeah, so usually members would have some form of connection within the community already that's organically formed. For example, like it could be a friend that they might already know. So usually we can start from that connection. And also it doesn't have to be the here and now that you must form a connection with your neighbor right now, because families are also dynamic and they evolve over time. So there could be a time where the family is more ready to step up into the community. I think related to this is also a question that we asked in our interview, which is, do you think CCP is suitable for all cases? So I think there were mixed responses from interviewees about this. So some said that crisis cases are not suitable. Some said that all cases are suitable. But I think at the end of the day, it's about applying the principles of CCP in case management and also assessing the suitability and the stability of the family for the intervention. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's for the audience online.
Social worker, but I'm just curious. I mean, if there are lots of advantages of empowering community, right? Then all this notion about rebalancing power and all that. I just wonder, what are the precipitating circumstances that have made you launch into this approach? is it an innovative approach? Is it because of COVID and the experiences of COVID, or is this something which is modeled based on other countries' experiences? What is it that you, what shapes or what is the context for why you want to adopt this approach? And do you see the potential of it incorporated into curriculum in social work and things like that as a possible new approach to to overcoming problems? Thank you.
Thanks, Aisha. It's a very powerful reminder, right, of back to a root question. So it's I always say the simplest questions are sometimes the hardest to answer, right? But so important. So I think what precipitated this was in the context of SEC, we have been trying to do community work. And then what we discover is when a team starts doing community work and we try to, follow the approaches of the ABCD approach, then we realize that casework and community becomes dichotomous because it is somehow relied upon that an existing emerging team will do all the necessary work that's needed. And then the social work just continue your de facto traditions, we call it, right? And so we realized that when the communities and the families that we were helping in the organization and coming to our centers were interacting with different people in the organization in a different manner, we realized that different people and different touch points were receiving different kinds of information. So example, a family A goes to a social worker and is known in the community. He or she will present as, I have family violence, I have financial assistance. But yet when the community worker experiences this person in the community, sees a different side of this person able to be a connector, being able to lend in resources. And then we question and say, why is the same person like a bit of a personality disordered situation? Then we say it seems like maybe the way we have been operating seems to have undermined certain things. So that's where we said CCP then should be somewhat a continuing flow out, a waterfall effect into casework. So we felt that within the organization, there was dissonance to begin with. So that is when we said that, okay, it became a preferred option of operating this, right, OS system. Those who like community work, or please join this camp. Those who somewhat feel like you would love to subscribe to positive hesitance, please join the other camp, but otherwise continue your de facto modality. What was not effective was the members, because they were interacting differently and they weren't responding weren't in different ways. So we realized, hey, we bring the two together, it would be very important, because the community at the end of the day is where the family's natural habitat exists. The casework, its only touch point helps, but the natural habitat is where families are. And that's where real change needs to happen. So that's when I think it was a compelling reason for us to rethink, right? And then we always say, SEC loves to embrace ABCD. And then there was this challenge around great, but then how come casework we say we do one thing, but we actually exercise a different thing. So the left hand exercises a different muscle, the right hand exercises a different muscles, but both are not coordinated. So we realized that actually this is a sustainable option if we talk about long-term change, because professionals' intervention has its limitation. So that's the other contributive piece, is we are starting to realize, and COVID might have just enlarged that awareness and kind of propelled everybody, but it was already there in the shadows, that during COVID, when you have lesser, you see the rise of communities, you see the rise of people coming into those roles. And that's where I think we need to play a more strategic role. So I hope that answered your question, but it's a very powerful, fundamental question for why we need to do what we do, rather than because it is the flavor of the years to come, because now everything's about solidarity, right? And forwarding, right? So I just want to qualify that I don't think it's innovative. In fact, I think we're going back to our fundamental roots. So back to the question, we are actually going back to its origins, where we talk about Gotong Royong, when we talk about people bringing back the kampung spirit, it's actually already intrinsically there in its early years, just forgotten in the gallows and now brought back as a maverick, right? So hopefully it would spill out into a norm, and that could be something that could give casework a lot more strength. Yeah, hope that answered. Thank you.
Thank you for that very insightful answer and very, very important question. I know now I suddenly feel like I belong somewhere. I used to be like, oh, the black sheep. But yeah, there's another question here, and I'd like to add on to that question as well. It says, apart from supporting networking between your members, right, and yourself, the organization, so you connect members, right? Does CCP also connect with other organizations? So instead of just members connecting with members, do you connect with other organizations, hospitals, childcare centers, schools, for example? Yeah, and if you do, if you could provide maybe one example of how that happens in case. Thank you.
And so to respond to that question, so post-research, we also did further theoretical refining of CCP. So while in CCP, we try to engage first and foremost the informal resources in the community, because that could bring about empowerment and also foster mutual community support. But at the same time, we also do not neglect the formal agencies' participation and partnering with agencies to bring about the coordinated effort to support our community members as well. Yeah. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Yeah, for example, do you speak to them, let's say, for example, you have child protection case, right? That you do. So typically, if you were to embed CCP within it, do you then get other, like, connect members, but also other individuals from agencies to come on board as well, the case, but not in a, the typical caseworker settings where it's professional, but within the community? So for example, if you connect with the SEN officer, the special education needs officer, or the school counselor, for example, right? Do you then engage with the school counselors within the community to connect the school counselor with the members' community as well?
Maybe I try to take on this question. So I think it's a very relevant question. Right now, we're talking about, because we have our belief in the CCP. At the same time, so we're actually taking charge and also encourage the community to actually work on this. But we can't assume, because I mean, each of the agency, they have their own protocol. They also struggle with their own workload, perhaps. So that's why I think it's very hard, even though we come with this heart to try to promote this idea. So we would try our very best to involve them, but that it's actually a mutual thing, right? It's a reciprocal. So, but most of the time, what happened would be in terms of casework. So it's a matter of timing. Yeah, so we will involve those relevant parties, for example, child protection and the other social service partner. So at that point in time, that they come with a purpose. But for us, we actually bring in this concept. So we truly believe in CCP. So that's why we would just introduce the informal kind of support as one of the options. For example, within a case conference, so we suggest to the partners, let's consider, because in the community, there will be some informal resources. Yeah, for them, we need to advocate for that, because I think they may think that, okay, so we shall rely more onto the formal resources. They're safer, more controllable. But for us, we will try to advocate and then let them understand the potential benefit that we can get from there. So I think this is also an ongoing process. Yeah, so we try to help the other service partner to get to know about the beauty of it. Yeah, but it's also a matter of timing. Because I think I have to admit that some of the case scenario, for example, that come with arising child protection concern. Yeah, so our priority may not be that. Yeah, even though after that, I think after the safety concern has been controlled, then we can actually look into the informal support.
Yeah.
But I think the professional input is important at that point in time.
Yeah.
So that we have different priority. I hope that we address that question.
So you have to address the safety and confidentiality concerns and issues first. And if you've assessed that it's okay to move to the informal support, then you move to that, right? Yeah.
I think maybe one point to add is I think it's a co-created situation, right? So if there are situations that the families are not able to address on their own, which is risk and protection, then it's very clear. So I always ask this question, right, which can also be applied to CCP, and in Comwork, that's what we do too, is what are things that they can do by themselves that they don't need us to? And I usually respect those domains. But if there are certain areas that they seem to not be able to function and they call out, or rather there are signs for us to believe that so we need tertiary interventions, then we would need to step in. Though primarily, I would love to leverage on at least the primary assets of things. So we had a situation where, okay, so there was a question around before, say, if it's child protection, I can't exercise CCP. So I disagree with that, okay? So it really is dependent on the situation, the connectivity of the members, the confidence and the ability of the workers to exercise some of those abilities. So, for an example, we had a case of a child who was sexually abused, and the child walked into the center accompanied by another child. And this child was connected to another. So they were actually both our cases, but somehow this girl was discovered right nearby by another member's daughter, and she shared about the disclosure of her father who had actually sexually abused her. And what was very interesting was this girl who brought her in informed her mother, who was our member too, but just by a different worker, right? And what was really assuring was, of course, we needed to ensure the safety, and the worker did all that was necessary, right, to do due diligence to the accountability of the child, which at that point, perhaps the main primary person couldn't. So because it couldn't, so the professional interventions must be clear. Tertiary support and connectivity is coming in to mitigate certain issues. But what was really nice was that this girl's mother, who was then made aware, actually came, and I recall even offered a place to this girl and says, if you really can't find a place, I'm willing to hold her in for a day. And she just lives a few blocks away, right? Social workers here, okay, so cannot say the name, okay. So due to confidentiality reasons, of course, we cannot say, but I'm just giving the context and the gist of it. Is what was really nice was that the community was able to say, hey, she lives here, right? I don't know her mother, but my daughter knows her, and we've discovered this, and I'm willing to offer her at least to stay for the night because it's so late. And so the social worker have time to do due diligence, all the reporting and everything, right? But what was just really nice was that we discovered, and this a parent was also still concerned even after that to say, is everything okay? And offered as a resource to say, she can come to my place at any point of time whenever she's not safe. And I think just by that piece, if we were so caught up in the moment, we would have missed to smell that rose that was just there on the roadside. And then we forget, you see. So sometimes those are powerful moments. So I just thought I wanted to bring our attention to that primary assets has its ability, but tertiary and professional interventions is also necessary where needed. It's just that they must know their place and order of things. That's what I'm saying. And that we have to acknowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. This brings me to the next question. Oh, there's a question next. Yes, the microphone.
Yeah, thanks for the insightful sharing. Just wanted to ask you, so because I think you all mentioned just now about like the fear of social workers' liability. Yeah, and then also I think I'm just curious, how do you all manage the conflict that might arise between members that have been connected, and especially managing the expectations of the resource or service that they receive from the community?
Bruce? Tall order question. Liability, okay. Okay, so I guess, it's not an easy question. I just want to say it's an everyday struggle. But the clarity must lie. So it's a team approach. That's one way to kind of answer that. Is the social worker cannot go in cold, expected to navigate on his or her own. So sometimes we do have social workers who come to us, and they should be, right, to say, hey, I introduced a member to another person who might be child-minding, example, right? And then you realize that the neighbor could not be perhaps the best person because maybe he or she had another 3 other to watch, right? And then had questions to believe about the compromise of care. So what we tend to try to do is first, we need to assess whether this member is something that he or she wants to offer. Second, workers must also be able to facilitate and navigate whether he or she is capable to provide that particular connecting issue, or rather an asset that can be matched meaningfully, and can it be safe? So I think it's a discerning moment between the professional trying to say, okay, great. If it's child minding, obviously it's caregiving, right? It's care and control reasons. It's a child, it's a minor. So then that will take, it's a different way of assessing and seeing how to match. If it's around communities in food rations, example, whether or not the food and confinement and all, I think there are two parts. One is we do need to communicate to members. Then when they connect and form that natural connections, that they have to set up amongst themselves clear communications, even though the connecting ties may have started with us, but their sense of agency, and agency is also around their own abilities to have their own decision-making at that point and at moving points is critical. So we have to set that with members to tell them that connecting you a point doesn't make us responsible for your life, nor that connection. So we do kind of have to, for some situations, they're aware. And some is we just need to come into what we call mediate, right? Mediate between members to say, hey, great, somehow things can sour. And let's see how both of you would want to kind of take that on to resolve that difference. If it involves child, of course, then we'll take a different course of action altogether. But we would have been able to assess it first if there was suitability. So that's a different for those that are risk. Other than that, if you ask me, food ration, sometimes you do have really minor disputes, like, she paid extra $5 for my orange juice, she didn't pay me back, right? Okay, she didn't pay now me or something, and we just say, that's very normal, right? I mean, neighbors also have disputes. So we try to also remind people and balance that power, that along with it comes your sense of agency. We facilitate, but we are not responsible for your connections. So I think that's the part that we need to discern quite clearly.
Yeah. So you need to manage expectations from the get-go.
Yes. But of course, if we connect, example, I remember we had a youth group that came out from a group of members. And then there was this question, right? Should there be somebody to go and chaperone the kids because they are self-organizing, right? So there was a situation once, and then we had a debate between the community workers and the social workers between, who is responsible. And I guess we concluded at that point that because it was in the premises of our center, that the group was self-organizing, that we felt it was still important to have the community worker present because it was within the premises and, it was something facilitated, and because they were all young persons with challenging backgrounds. So we felt that was important. So we can make a call, right? Mm-hmm. But we do involve the members themselves. So we shouldn't be deciding on our own, right? But we can ask and say, okay, this was formed out of this. And what's happened with that? Thank you for coming back to us, but let's try to resolve and delineate some of those connections and what's connecting. So I think it's really a lot having to help people to kind of work that out, right?
Yeah. Navigating the relationships, mediating as and when.
Yeah. So it's part of the work. Yeah, but I mean, it's no different. You have to navigate from a professional point with organizing agencies anyway. Yeah. So it's just a matter of who you organize with, right? Maybe if you do it in a professional manner, you also have to deal with other agencies who have different expectations of you, different accountabilities, different connectivity. So I see it as a parallel process. Yeah. It's just that the difference is that now you are talking about the people themselves. So I think the difference is you're not dealing with agencies versus agencies. You're doing with people from the agency dealing with people on the communities. So I think that's where the context slightly varies.
Yeah, where the people themselves have the agency.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And also just a quick question, and then after that we'll have our last question. Quick question. This one says, and I was wondering about this as well, about the food ration, who pays for it?
It's like a digestive question, right? Anything that doesn't answer will get regurgitated. Okay. So in fact, what was very interesting, maybe I can give context to that because I happen to know that the previous worker of that question around the confinement. Okay, so not food ration, maybe I can answer the confinement food question also, right? Actually, what was meant to be a paid arrangement for the confinement food, okay, the food ration, I'll come to it, right? Was that the member was going to offer to cook confinement and be paid for it because she's also unemployed, right? So the member said, yeah, okay, I can pay a nominal sum. So, but what's very interesting was unfolded was that worker actually said after the member actually offered the food and saw how the family was struggling, she gave it free. And she said, you know what? My goodwill. Okay, so what started out as struck out as a paid deal because I don't know you, right? So then in the end, I said, Hana, now I see you already, right? And see your children there and your little baby. Okay, conscience has eaten me. So I will give you free for 2 weeks. Right. But she says, but hang on, I pulled the handbrakes. I've only got this amount of time. And so that is what happens. Food rations, I think for this member, who was interviewed, usually it is actually, if food rations are actually given, sometimes is they have their own local organizing food rations that they are aware. So in fact, I think some of their members are already involved with some of the food initiatives on the ground. And so what they do is they just basically connect in that resources that they are familiar with the family, which I think that the Mr. A who was interviewed was the case. So to answer the story short, the food ration is not paid by us. Okay, it was actually somehow connected through. Yeah, so I hope that answers. And maybe Jae-hui?
So if I were to add on, so actually community members do step up based on their own goodwill and actually offer their own resources. So actually what we saw during COVID was mothers who stepped up to cook for their community, for neighbors who were quarantined and isolated at home. And personally, I also had a casework member who volunteered to cook bento for the neighbors living on her floor. And this comes from their own expenses. So actually, it is important for us on whether we can identify this existing support that neighbors do provide for each other. And we could be surprised, that communities do have resources and are already addressing some of the needs on the ground by themselves.
Thank you. We have one last question. If we want to take from yourself.
Hi. Hello. Yeah, I want to ask if so in community things are a bit fluid and messy, right? So but you're factoring this into your interventions. So sometimes community members commit to something. They say they will do this, they'll cook this, or they'll bring this, and then they, due to life constraints, they drop the ball, right? They don't complete the task. Then what happens? Does the social worker come in? Who comes in to stopgap this or manage risk if it's a risk and issue? Yeah, so I think that's the typical thing we see in communities. Community members are not paid, right? Yeah, so they and life happens, right? So things they don't fulfill certain things that committed to happens.
Thanks, gentlemen. Didn't get your name. Javon, okay. Thanks. That's a very good question. So I think you rightly point out that I think the community is fluid. Whether it's messy, it depends. Yeah, but I think, but for us, I think, well, when I look into these questions, I think it's actually part and parcel of our life, right? Sometimes at times that we would have ups and downs, and then things can get messy at times. So I think when you are looking into this, I wouldn't particularly say that our experience working with the community would be quite messy or uncontrollable. I mean, it happens. Things would happen. No matter whether with SSC, our existence, the connection among the community would actually goes on their own. And then we're just right now trying to facilitate it and also be part of it because we also see ourselves as part of the system. So we just live with the flow. So if the things come in a more tidy way, it's okay, that's good. But if it's actually come in a messy way, okay, just live with it and see how we can actually position ourselves to be functional in this piece of mess. Yeah, so that's just, I think that's a spirit. But I think at the end of the day, I would think that as a professional, even though we name ourselves as a professional, so we shall not be afraid, too afraid of, getting our hands dirty. Yeah, because I think right now we're talking about we are being social or clinician in the community. So that's why I think somehow, we have to have a better tolerance in terms of facing the messiness that might be going on somewhere. Yeah, that's also part and also the nature of our work, I guess. Yeah, hope that I sufficiently address your questions. Yes.
Who meets the need? He's asking. So, like, do you monitor, the help that member to member is giving? Do we monitor? And then if that falls through, then who else will meet the need? What's the contingency?
Yeah. So field connections, right? We call it, right? usually happens on two things. One is there's no relationship built yet. It's transaction connected. It's not relationship built. We have had in the past when people actually are built based on relationships to form that connections or meeting mutual needs, they will usually tell you when they cannot turn up and they cannot deliver. So that is a learning point for us. We've learned. So we tried that if you try to match transaction with transactions, you will get transactional results, which is no show, right? And then we learn, okay, if you build relationships over time and a person feels bad that I know this neighbor and I cannot deliver, I better tell the neighbor, I'm sorry, I cannot deliver food today, right? Because someone's waiting for you. So that's one. But you're right, other than that, the social workers do still need to manage and to see, okay, are there other sources of support? Sometimes they do lean into things like volunteers, then, volunteer driven, which is secondary assets to lean in. So yes, so we can't leave the gap there and say, hey, good luck to you. I'm so sorry your neighbor failed you. So, but unfortunately, because we're not their neighbors, right? So we do then need to do due diligence to see if we can leverage on secondary assets. But primary first, that's what we are saying, right? Let's look at what your family can do. So just give it a context. Some of you have children, right? And let's say your child is in childcare and the teacher says your child is sick. They will call you, right? It says, hi parent, I'm so sorry. And we're all working people, right? Oh, sounds familiar, right? True story. So something closer to heart, like easier about field connections, okay? And then it says, okay, but I'm working, I'm sitting here and I'm talking. So how can I just run out of this place? And then you say, hi, could I get my husband? Maybe my husband's also working, right? Then a parent. So we start leaning into natural support, which is our primary asset, and the natural de facto operandus for us. So the same question is what I would take, right? Next is, okay, is there anybody at home who can be mobilized? And if no, anybody, maybe I call my neighbor. So I know my neighbor's opposite quite well. So sometimes if there's anything, I'll mobilize her and she's offered that, right? So I already am able to build my own resources that I can leverage upon. But this is what I mean. And then if you really can't, then you try a secondary approach, right? And then you really can't, you try and maybe deliver your child from somewhere to home, right? So you see, then you deploy a secondary option. And then the worst case is a tertiary option. I'm not sure what that looks like, but it could be a colleague's contact or something, right? Who is absolutely out of your scope. So I would say that in that order of things is how we would deploy. Just as if we can't find, then the workers, will have to come in to fill those spaces, or at least need time to build those in time. So over time, if we discover that this member is isolated and over time not able to, like Mr. A's case, he had just moved into the neighborhood. Our longer term goal with him is that he can build at least a handful of good neighbors who can support, because his wife is visually handicapped. And so that means that Mr. A's wife will not only need to rely on his two eyes, he needs to realize that his wife needs to have a lot more pairs of eyes in the community to look out for her and her child, because she's also transnational. So you see, so then my work with, maybe now they need food ration. So I may provide an immediate, right? And then the intermediate, which is members coming in. But in the long term, I need to build that network. But you see, that's part of the principled thinking of how we would move, rather than I need to bridge that food gap. So therefore, I can either order Grab for you and solve that problem for a member and then claim it through a program funding, or I can know conscientiously that I need to build those pillars in place.
Thank you. I think we have come to the end of the seminar. This has been very enlightening, very, very insightful. And I actually look forward to CCP being advocated more, into the social service sector as a practice, because I see it as an important tool or important conduit to sort of cultivate that culture of community spirit, right? The solidarity to safeguard the community, to build safe spaces around the community. Whether it be in terms of crisis or in terms of day-to-day challenges, right? So thank you very much for the amazing work that you do. And thank you very much for the webinar. Thank you everybody for attending this webinar today. And thank you to those I can't see who was online for your questions and for tuning in. Jahan?
Thank you. Thank you again, the team from SCC and Dr. Hana for moderating this session. So before we leave, sorry, I know we have overrun, but yeah, just want to ask for everyone's feedback for today's seminar. So for those who are joining us here, please scan the QR code. The feedback form only has 2 questions. And for those on Zoom, please write your feedback using the Zoom poll. You can ignore this slide. So as mentioned, we will the SEC team has kindly agreed to share their presentation slides as well as the link to this report in a follow-up email to all registrants, including those who are unable to attend today. And one last thing, which is this overview of our upcoming symposium and webinars for the first half of this year. So if you want to find out more and receive regular updates, please join our mailing list using the QR code on this screen. Thank you so much. We have come to the end of today's seminar. Thank you for joining us and have a good evening.